Everyone said I was the perfect daughter. Camille Browning, valedictorian of the graduating class at Boston's prestigious East Bridge Medical School, fluent in 3 languages, published research before the age of 24, a last name that carried weight in hospital corridors across the state. The child of Charles and Lena Browning, a legacy family in medicine. The press loved us. The alumni board adored us. Our Christmas cards were always professionally lit, my white coat crisp and centered in every frame, my parents flanking me with pride. It was a narrative polished to perfection, and I was trained from birth to uphold it. But that narrative was a lie, and I lived in it like a coffin. At home, love was conditional. Every achievement had a price. My father was chief of surgery and thought of parenting the same way he thought of a hospital budget. Efficient, unyielding, transactional. He never yelled. His control was quiet, cold, exacting. Like the time I got a B in organic chemistry sophomore year and woke up to find my laptop wiped clean. He said it was a lesson. Distractions are a luxury only the mediocre afford. My mother smiled as if it were reasonable. Lena Browning, perfect hostess, perfect wife, perfect smile. She said it was character building. She called it discipline as if every surveillance app on my phone and every bank statement he reviewed was normal. I was a tenant in my own body, a puppet in a house built on pressure. What they never saw, what they never let me show, was that I was suffocating. I never wanted to be a doctor. I admired the science, yes, but my heart belonged somewhere else entirely. In high school, I fell in love with anatomical illustration. Not the rote diagrams in textbooks, but the vivid expressive renderings that translated life onto paper. I would spend hours sketching muscle fibers, the curve of a tendon, the delicate layering of tissue. It was art, with purpose, truth, with beauty. I told my father once. I had been offered a scholarship to Parsons for scientific illustration. He didn't even look up from his phone. Medical illustrators are glorified hobbyists. If you choose that path, you are no longer my daughter. I remember the silence that followed. I remember the way my mother poured tea like nothing had happened. We've already told the board you're attending East Bridge. That's final. I learned that day that my dreams were irrelevant. My wants, my desires, none of it mattered. I was not a daughter. I was a projection. The Browning Legacy 3.0. So I nodded. I folded. I accepted the prison and smiled in every photo. I obeyed because I didn't know there was another choice. But I did not disappear. Late at night, after studying until my eyes burned, I would pull out my sketch pad and draw. Hidden under my bed, tucked between physiology textbooks, were hundreds of pages, veins, rendered in watercolor cross-sections of lungs, etched in ink neurons, sprawling across pages like constellations. They were my secret oxygen. They were me. My only refuge was Jade, my roommate and best friend who studied medical design. She had a studio apartment off campus and let me store my artwork there. She never asked questions. She only ever said one thing over and over. You are allowed to want something else. You are allowed to be more than what they made you. At school, one professor began to notice. Dr. Mira Khan, a leading figure in medical innovation, once stopped me after a clinical illustration I had submitted for an elective. You have the gift of clarity, Camille. Ever considered pursuing this seriously? I laughed. My father would disown me. She looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "And what would you do if he wasn't watching?" That question haunted me. I carried it with me like a hidden pulse under my skin. But I never answered it, because I was too afraid to find out. Until graduation day. Until the moment everything unraveled in front of thousands. Until my father decided to destroy me in public to preserve the illusion he worshipped. He never saw what was coming next, but I had been preparing for years. In secret. In silence. With every pencil stroke and suppressed scream. And I was done hiding. The story didn't start at East Bridge. It started in the Browning household when I was a child, trained like a soldier to perform perfection. My earliest memories weren't of playgrounds or bedtime stories, but of color-coded schedules on the fridge, daily piano practice at 6 Mandarin lessons at 8, and the unspoken rule that failure was weakness. My father didn't yell. He didn't need to. Disappointment hung heavier than any raised voice. When I cried because I was tired or overwhelmed, he would sit silently across the table and stare until I stopped. Weakness is a disease, Camille. Cure it or be consumed. I was 10 the first time he took me to the hospital wing he ruled like a kingdom. He walked the halls as if they belonged to him, and in a way they did. Nurses stiffened when he passed, residents lowered their eyes. "This is what power looks like," he said, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "One day this will be yours." I was 14 when I placed top 3 in a regional art competition. I came home beaming my sketch of a dissected heart framed in gold. My mother smiled tightly. "We didn't raise you to chase hobbies, Camille." The next day, the frame was gone. My supplies locked away. "We need you focused." Focused meant obedience. It meant sacrificing self for legacy. The summer I turned 17, I received offers from 8 top universities, among them Parsons School of Design and Eastbridge Medical. I knew what I wanted. I also knew what was expected. I brought the acceptance letters to dinner hopeful. My mother poured wine. My father scanned the letters like financial reports. "You will attend Eastbridge. Parsons isn't an option. It's a waste of our money, of our name." I stared at them numb. I tried to protest to explain the fusion of art and medicine, but he cut me off. "You're not buying into this bohemian nonsense." End of discussion. The next morning, my art portfolio was missing. My sketchbooks, too. My father claimed he didn't know. My mother said maybe I lost them, but Jade found them later, torn apart and stuffed into a garbage bag in our driveway. That was the first time I understood that they would rather destroy my soul than see me veer off course. College didn't free me. It tightened the leash. They tracked my spending, reviewed my course load, called every week to interrogate my grades. When I signed up for an anatomy illustration elective, my father found out. The phone call was chilling. "Drop it. Or we drop you. No tuition, no car, no rent." I dropped it, publicly, but I stayed in class. Jade registered under her name and switched ID badges. I sat in the back, sketching in silence, knowing the punishment if I was caught. That's how I survived 4 years of medical school, living a lie by day, painting truth by night. My hands performed dissections, but my eyes memorized the way the nerves branched like roots beneath the skin. I submitted research on tissue regeneration while illustrating it on parchment I kept hidden in Jade's closet. I built 2 lives. One of them was mine. And still, I kept hoping perhaps some part of me still craved approval. That maybe if I graduated with honors, if I became the perfect daughter they wanted, I could finally carve out space for my truth. I rehearsed speeches in my mind. Maybe after the ceremony. Maybe over dinner. Maybe then. I didn't know that my father had already found the hidden files in Jade's drive, that he had already planned my punishment, that he was going to weaponize the very moment I had worked 4 years for to humiliate me, that instead of applauding when I crossed the stage, he would rise and destroy everything in front of everyone, that he would burn his own daughter to preserve his image. That day would change everything, not because of the pain, but because it would light a fire I would never put out. And for the first time in my life, the story wouldn't belong to them. It would belong to me. Graduation morning felt unreal, like I was moving through fog. I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in my cap and gown, fingers trembling as I adjusted the gold honors cord draped over my shoulders. My mother knocked once before entering, her eyes skimming me like a scanner. "You look puffy," she said, tugging at the fabric. "You should have done something about that dress. No time now, I suppose." She walked away before I could answer. My father sat in the living room reading notes for a speech he insisted on giving at the private dinner later that evening. He didn't glance up. "Today's important, Camille. Don't embarrass us. The Hendersons will be there and Dr. Lynn from the foundation. Represent us well." That was all I ever did. Represent, never exist. Jade texted as I got into the car with my parents. "You got this. Freedom Day." I clung to those words. When we arrived at the auditorium, the air was electric. Families hugged, camera flashes lit up the walkways. Students laughed with professors. I envied every one of them, not because they were graduating, but because they were free. My parents walked beside me like bodyguards waving to other medical elites. My father's handshake was crisp and political. My mother's smile was rehearsed. I caught sight of Dr. Khan standing near the faculty entrance. She gave me a subtle nod, the kind that said, "I see you." That meant everything. Inside, Jade saved seats near the aisle. Her face lit up when she saw me. She squeezed my hand. "You made it." I smiled for the first time that day. When they called the names, the applause echoed through the vast auditorium. One by one, students rose accepted diplomas and waved to their cheering families. Then came my name, Camille Elaine Browning, Doctor of Medicine, summa cum laude. My legs moved on autopilot as I ascended the stage. The spotlight blinded me for a moment, but I held my chin high. This was supposed to be my moment. I reached out for the diploma fingers brushing the leather when I heard it. That voice. "Stop right there." The auditorium silenced. My father's voice boomed as he stormed onto the stage. His suit immaculate face flushed with fury. "This is a fraud! She does not deserve this honor!" Gasps rippled through the audience. I froze, horror anchoring me in place. My father grabbed the microphone from the dean. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but I will not let this farce continue. This girl, my daughter, has lied to all of you. She's been hiding behind our name, our money, while secretly pursuing a childish fantasy." He turned and threw a folder onto the ground. Pages spilled across the stage. Sketches. My sketches. The audience stared. I felt the air drain from my lungs. These were found hidden in her apartment. While we believed she was studying medicine, she was wasting our resources on this nonsense. "Art." He spat the word like poison. "You were supposed to be a doctor. You were supposed to honor this family." He turned to me, eyes burning. "Instead, you betrayed us." His hand shot out and slapped the diploma from my fingers. It clattered to the floor. For a second, the world stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there as the silence thickened. And then I heard it. My mother's laugh from the front row. "Told you she was always a little off Richard. Always sneaking around." The dean stepped forward, stunned. "Dr. Browning, please, this is neither the time nor the place." My father ignored him. Security moved toward the stage, but slowly. They didn't seem to believe it was real. I wasn't sure I did either. My body trembled, heat rushing to my face. I wanted to disappear. But then I saw Jade standing at the edge of the aisle, her eyes wide with fury, mouthing one word. "Breathe." I felt a hand on my arm. "Dr. Khan. Come with me, Camille. Now." I let her guide me off stage through a side exit. The door closed behind us, muffling the chaos. I collapsed against the wall, heart pounding so loud it was deafening. Everyone saw. Everyone. Jade burst through the door seconds later. "Camille." "Oh my God, I'm calling the police." "No, no police. They'll make it worse." Dr. Khan crouched beside me. "This isn't the first time, is it?" I couldn't answer. She nodded understanding. "You don't have to go home." "You hear me? You don't ever have to go back to them?" "My apartment has a guest room," Jade said. "We'll get your things. They'll be at that dinner until late, right?" I nodded. 6 o'clock. He's giving a speech. They won't be home till 9. Then we move fast. We do this now." I wiped my face, the tears finally coming. My voice cracked. "This is the end. I'm done with them forever. I meant it." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that truth. We pulled up to my childhood home just before sunset, the driveway empty as expected. The grandeur of the house had always intimidated me as a child, towering windows and manicured hedges framing a life I had never truly belonged to. Now, standing outside it with Jade and Dr. Khan, it felt like enemy territory. We moved fast. I knew every creaking floorboard, every loose tile, every drawer where secrets were kept. Upstairs, I threw open my old closet, dragging out suitcases and packing only what mattered: important documents, my stethoscope clothes. I had actually chosen myself, my sketch pads from the hidden compartment under my bed. Downstairs, Jade rifled through the cabinets looking for my birth certificate and academic records. She found them in a locked drawer in my mother's office exactly where I'd guessed. I headed into my father's study, the place I was rarely allowed. I found my passport locked in a lower drawer of his mahogany desk and retrieved the emergency cash I had once saved but never dared use, over $3,000, in an envelope marked Camille, behavior correction. Behind one of his framed certificates, I found something I hadn't expected: my grandmother's necklace. A delicate gold chain with an engraved charm I used to love as a child, taken from me years ago after an argument. My mother always said she was keeping it safe. I slipped it into my pocket. It was mine again. We worked in silence, our movements fast but careful. I knew they would come back around 9, and I refused to be here a second longer than I had to. By the time the trunk was full and the last box was taped shut, I took one final look at the room I grew up in. The walls were bare now, the shelves empty. The girl who had lived here, the one who tried so hard to be what they wanted, was gone. She died the moment he humiliated her on that stage. What stood in her place was someone else, someone angry, someone clear. As we drove away, I refused to look back. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. That house could burn, and I wouldn't blink. Back at Jade's apartment, the adrenaline wore off. My body ached. My mind throbbed with everything that had happened. I curled into a ball on the second-hand couch, a mug of tea in my hands, and stared into nothing. Jade sat beside me, silent, anchoring me. Dr. Khan made a call to a friend of hers, someone she trusted. Her name was Miriam Lowe, a lawyer who specialized in family abuse cases. The next afternoon, I sat in Miriam's office while she read through the printed text messages and emails I had brought. Threats to cut off tuition messages about my weight, audio clips of my father belittling my choices. She placed the last page down and looked up. This is enough to begin. Enough for a restraining order. Maybe more. I want to make it public, I said quietly. I want people to see what they are. Miriam nodded slowly. Then we do this smart, strategic, documented. You don't just burn them, you dismantle them. Piece by piece. It was the first time someone had spoken about revenge, not as vengeance, but as justice. That evening, Jade and I created a board on her wall, photos, screenshots, names, dates. We used colored string markers, everything you'd expect from a crime thriller. But this wasn't fiction. This was my life, and I would not let them bury me in silence again. A week later, my phone rang with an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. Camille, it's Heather, your mother's sister. I hadn't heard that voice in a decade. She had been erased from the family for reasons I never fully understood. I saw what happened, she said softly. The video, the way he treated you. I've worn that same look before. I asked to meet, and we did, in a quiet cafe 3 towns over. She told me everything. How my father sabotaged her scholarship to pursue psychology. How my mother stayed silent when he cut her out of family investments. How he used money and shame like weapons. You escaped. You're stronger than we were. She reached across the table. And now you're not alone. The next morning, Miriam called. Someone had reached out to her confidentially, James Lee, my father's business partner. He had been at the graduation. He wanted to talk. When we met, he was calm but disturbed. Your father lied to all of us, Camille. I never knew he was like that behind closed doors. He said the Henderson deal, the one worth over $20 million, was now shaky. Investors didn't want to associate with someone who slaps his daughter in public. I leaned forward. Is he working on anything else? James nodded. The Hawthorne expansion, a $40 million research project. It's his legacy play. I stared at the file James handed me, full of budgets, projections, pitch decks. If the graduation tarnished his image, this would be the stake through the heart. I didn't want to ruin him just for what he did to me. I wanted to destroy the illusion he spent his life hiding behind. The father, the doctor, the man. I wanted him exposed, publicly, irrevocably. And I knew exactly how I would do it. The Hawthorne Expansion Gala was scheduled for the second Friday of the month at the Bellingham Grand Hotel, a lavish event meant to unveil the future of cutting-edge medical research in our state. It was Charles Browning's crown jewel, his ultimate triumph before retirement, and the guest list included state officials, hospital boards, and media outlets. Every investor he had spent years cultivating would be in that room. Jade and I spent nights preparing. We had the flash drive ready. The graduation video, the audio clips, the screenshots, all time-stamped, verified, and organized. Miriam provided the legal framework, ensuring that nothing we released would come back as libel or slander. Uncle James confirmed that the tech team could switch the presentation if we got the signal right. Aunt Heather arranged press passes through one of her friends in the media. Even Dr. Khan, quietly fierce, offered to sit in the back of the room just in case he tried to rewrite the truth again. The night of the gala, I wore a black blazer and carried myself like the woman he refused to let me become. I walked through the gold-lined lobby with Jade at my side, her red lipstick bold, her glare sharper than diamonds. Uncle James greeted us near the bar, eyes flicking around nervously. "Are you sure about this? There's no going back?" I gave him a half smile. He made that choice when he broke me in front of everyone. The ballroom was dressed in prestige. Waiters carried champagne on silver trays. Classical music played softly in the background. Large monitors framed the stage, each ready to display renderings of the new facility. My father stood near the podium shaking hands, his smile flawless. My mother hovered at his elbow, graceful and calculating. She spotted me from across the room and froze. I held her gaze. She looked away first. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The host took the stage, welcomed guests, and introduced Dr. Charles Browning. The crowd applauded. He stepped up to the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed he had won. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Tonight we unveil not only a vision of innovation, but a tribute to integrity, discipline, and legacy." He gestured to the screen behind him. "My daughter is one of our most recent Eastbridge graduates. She represents the next generation." I clenched my jaw. Jade whispered into her earpiece, "We're live." I gave a subtle nod toward Aunt Heather near the control table. She tapped the laptop. The screens flickered. Instead of blueprints and projections, the video began. Graduation day. My name called. My walk across the stage. Then the outburst. My father's voice raw and vicious, his hand knocking the diploma from mine. The slap. The gasp from the audience. My mother's laugh. The ballroom fell silent. A slow, horrified silence. Murmurs rose as the video continued cutting to audio recordings, his voice belittling me, threatening to cut off tuition, criticizing my weight, calling my art pathetic. Then the emails. Red circles on PDFs projected across the screen, phrases like, "You are my investment, and your failure is a stain on my name." Someone at the front dropped their glass. My father stood frozen at the podium, mouth parted, eyes wide. "What is this? Shut it down. Turn it off." He turned to the side, but James stepped forward. "That's not all, Charles." The screen cut to bank records, transactions showing how he funneled charitable donations into his private accounts, recordings of him coercing interns into unpaid clinical trials. Whispers turned to outrage. Board members stood. One man from the University Medical Board asked aloud, "Is this who we trusted to train the next generation?" My father's composure cracked. His voice rose trembling with rage. "This is a setup. My daughter is a liar, a manipulative, ungrateful girl who's been corrupted." He stepped off the stage, heading toward me, finger raised. "You did this. I should have known. You're nothing without my name." He lunged. But security moved faster. 2 men stepped in front of me, hands out. "Sir, step back. This is your last warning." My mother tried to salvage what was left, rushing toward a group of investors. "Our daughter struggles with emotional instability. You know how young women can be. She's always been dramatic." But Dr. Khan rose from her seat in the back. "That young woman graduated top of her class. She mentored under me for 2 years. She's more capable than most I've taught in a decade." Another investor, arms folded, said quietly, "I know what domestic abuse looks like. And this is it," my father shouted again. "I built this empire. You all needed me. You still do." Miriam stepped forward. Phone raised, recording. "Mr. Browning, as Camille's attorney, I am informing you that a restraining order has been filed. This outburst is being documented and will be submitted as part of the hearing." "Is that a threat?" he barked. "No. It's a consequence." That's when the police entered. Officers in uniform, firm and calm. Dr. Charles Browning, you are under arrest for assault and battery, as well as pending investigation into financial misconduct. Please come with us. The room did not applaud. It did not need to. It simply watched as the image of the perfect man was escorted out in handcuffs, undone not by enemies, but by the daughter he tried to silence. Uncle James stepped onto the stage. Effective immediately, I am dissolving our partnership. The Hawthorne Project will continue under new leadership. Thank you. The lights dimmed again. I stood still as stone in the middle of it all, every nerve burning with adrenaline and grief. Jade squeezed my hand. You did it. I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the door where they had taken him away. It was over, but I knew. The damage he left in me would not disappear just because he was gone. This wasn't healing. It was justice, and that was enough. 3 weeks later, I sat in Dr. Khan's office staring at an email that had just arrived in my inbox. Congratulations, Camille Browning, on your acceptance to the Royal Academy of Medical Illustration in Amsterdam. We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship based on your exceptional portfolio and academic achievement. I read the words over and over until they stopped blurring. I had never felt lighter and heavier all at once. Dr. Khan beamed across the desk. You earned this, Camille. Not despite what happened, because of how you refused to let it define you. I nodded, unable to find words. Everything that had once held me hostage, my father's shadow, my mother's silence, their money, their rules, it was all crumbling behind me. Their names no longer opened doors. Their circle had abandoned them. His medical license was suspended pending investigation. Several past interns had come forward after the gala. Financial audits were underway. My mother had been shunned from every committee she once ran. The house I used to call home had become a fortress of shame, and still they couldn't let go. That evening, as I packed for the move to Amsterdam, my phone buzzed. A number I recognized but hadn't seen since the gala. A message from my mother. Camille, we're your parents. You can't cut us off forever. We made mistakes. We're sorry. Family forgives. I stared at the message, my chest tightening. For a second, I thought of the little girl I used to be, the one who practiced piano until her fingers bled, who stayed silent at the dinner table, who tried so hard to be enough. But that girl was gone. I typed 4 words. Watch me. Goodbye, forever. I pressed send and blocked the number. It wasn't forgiveness they wanted. It was access, control, relevance, and I owed them none of it. That night, I sat on the floor with Jade, sorting through the remnants of my old life. Sketches, journals, scars that had names. You okay? She asked. I gave a half smile. I will be. Jade pulled out one of my earliest drawings. It was a rendering of a ribcage, precise and delicate. You ever think about what it means drawing the inside of people? I shook my head. Maybe it's how I survived. I learned to see beneath the surface, to map where pain lived. A week later, I boarded the flight to Amsterdam, alone, unburdened. A blank chapter stretched before me, not a reinvention, but a reclamation. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into a life I had earned through blood, through defiance, through clarity. The academy welcomed me with warmth. The city breathed differently. I walked cobbled streets knowing no one could drag me back. Not anymore. At the museum, opening a month later, my first public exhibit went live, a series called Interior Fractures Illustrations that blended anatomical precision with emotional trauma. One piece depicted a spine splintering under pressure. Another showed a heart stitched with surgical thread, half beating, half burned. The room buzzed with quiet awe. Professors, peers, critics stood in front of the work murmuring praise. But none of that compared to the feeling I had when I stood in front of it myself. This was mine. Every stroke, every shadow. My pain turned into precision. My truth made visible. After the exhibit, a reporter approached. They asked the usual questions about technique, medium, inspiration. Then came the one that always lingered. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with your parents? I paused. People expect healing to look like reunion, like forgiveness. But sometimes survival means choosing distance. It means saying no to people who broke you and never looked back. I looked the reporter in the eye. Some stories don't end with closure. Some just end. And that's okay. As I walked away from the interview, the gallery lights dimming behind me, I felt no sorrow, only resolve. I wasn't healed, but I was free. And sometimes that's more powerful. Sometimes that's enough. Months passed. Amsterdam became home in ways Boston never could. I found rhythm in the canals, solace in the gray skies, and quiet joy in the way strangers didn't know my name. I took long walks with sketchbooks tucked under my arm, studying bodies in motion, translating every muscle and bone into meaning. At the academy, I was no longer the daughter of anyone. I was Camille. Just Camille. My instructors respected me. My classmates admired me. No one asked about my past, but when they eventually learned my story through the exhibit, they didn't pity me. They saw strength. They saw clarity. And that was all I had ever wanted. One morning as winter settled in, I received a letter from the Medical Ethics Board in Massachusetts. It contained confirmation that my father's license had been officially revoked. No appeal granted. No reinstatement possible. The verdict cited his public behavior testimonies from past colleagues and patients and the evidence submitted during our legal proceedings. Attached was a printed excerpt from the decision. The actions of Dr. Charles Browning constituted a breach of moral conduct, professional responsibility, and familial integrity. I folded the paper without a smile. There was no joy in reading those words, no sense of triumph. It was simply justice. Cold, necessary, complete. That same day, I received another envelope, this time without a return address. Inside was a single photo, me as a child standing next to my father, in a white coat 4 sizes too big. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "Remember who you were before you hated us." I placed it in the fireplace that night, watching the image curl and blacken in the flames. I remembered who I was, not because of them, in spite of them. My second exhibit opened in spring. It was titled Inheritance. Each piece portrayed a different organ system intertwined with symbols of legacy, control, and release. One showed lungs bound in gold chains. Another displayed a brain split down the middle, logic on one side, expectation on the other. Visitors came in waves. Some cried. Some stared for hours. Some left notes tucked between the gallery walls, messages of their own pain, their own silence. A woman in her 60s pressed a note into my hand as she left. "Thank you for reminding me that it's okay to walk away, even when it's your mother." It struck me then how many people carried invisible scars. How many wore chains shaped like love. That night I walked home alone, thinking about how grief doesn't vanish when abusers fall. It lingers. It reshapes you. I didn't forgive them. I didn't need to. That expectation, this idea that healing requires absolution, is another cage. One I refused to wear. Jade visited in the summer. We walked by the river, ate stroopwafels, and laughed like children. She asked if I missed anything about Boston. "Only you," I said. She paused. "Not even the idea of fixing things, no. Fixing them would have meant pretending they weren't broken in the first place. I can live without illusions. I don't want my life sanitized. I want it honest. That's why I draw. So I don't forget what truth looks like." She nodded and slipped her arm through mine. "You're the bravest person I know." I shook my head. "I'm just the one who got tired of bleeding quietly." One afternoon, I stood in front of a mirror in my studio, sketchbook in hand, trying to draw my own face. Not as a portrait, but as an internal map. What had changed? My eyes looked older. My jaw was firmer. There was a steadiness in my hand I hadn't had before. I drew until the light faded, tracing lines of pain into strength, fear into clarity. I titled the piece Anatomy of Survival. It wasn't for a gallery. It was for me. Proof that I was still standing, that I had turned everything they used to break me into something unshakable. In the final weeks of the semester, a student came up to me after class. She had quiet eyes and a hesitant voice. "I saw your exhibit. I'm trying to leave home. My father, he's like yours." I didn't offer advice. I didn't tell her what to do. I simply said, "You are not crazy. You are not weak. and you don't owe anyone your silence." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded and walked away stronger. I stood in that hallway for a long time, realizing that maybe this was the true purpose behind it all. Not revenge, not even freedom, but showing others what escape looks like, giving pain a shape, and maybe one day giving hope a name. My name, Camille Browning, not a daughter, not a legacy, just me, whole, unapologetic, and finally unowned. The day I graduated from the Royal Academy was nothing like my ceremony at Eastbridge. There were no screaming parents, no staged photographs, no audience full of expectations. Just a quiet hall, a sea of students who had fought their own battles, and the soft rustle of applause as each name was called. When they handed me my certificate, I felt its weight not as proof of academic success, but as a symbol of everything I had reclaimed. After the ceremony, I didn't celebrate with family. I walked alone through the Van Gogh Museum, breathing in brush strokes and silence, and wrote a single sentence in my notebook: "I am not what they tried to make me." A week later, an email arrived from a Boston news outlet. They were doing a follow-up story on the Browning case. The journalist asked if I wanted to comment now that the investigations had concluded, now that the state had officially filed criminal charges for financial misconduct, now that the hospital had renamed the research wing he once oversaw. I declined the interview. I didn't need more headlines. I had said everything I needed to with my work. But that same night, as if summoned by the echoes of the past, I received one final letter. Handwritten, no return address, but I knew the script. My mother, Camille, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to remember that we loved you even if we failed you. Your father is not the man he once was. I am not the woman I once was. You were always meant to shine. We just didn't know how to let you. I hope one day we can sit at a table again, as a family. I read it 3 times, and then I placed it in a drawer. Not out of sentiment, not out of rage, but because I needed to remind myself that some doors must stay closed, not slammed, not burned, just gently, permanently closed. A year later, I published a book of illustrations and essays titled Interior Truths. It wasn't a memoir. It was a map, a visual exploration of how the body holds trauma, how the mind rewrites pain, and how art becomes the language for what can't be spoken. The final piece in the collection was titled The Stage. It depicted a girl in a graduation robe standing at the center of an operating theater while faceless figures pointed, shouted, and reached to pull her down. But she was rising, not flying, not escaping, rising, slowly, with effort, with clarity. The book was picked up by universities, used in discussions about emotional abuse, power dynamics, and identity in medical education. I received letters from students, from survivors, from strangers. Each one confirmed what I had always felt, but had never dared to believe that truth when spoken without apology becomes a lifeline. Years passed. I moved into a quiet studio in Utrecht with wide windows and shelves full of anatomy texts and paintbrushes. I lectured occasionally, traveled, taught others how to see the body not just as a machine, but as a story. One rainy evening, Jade called. She had just gotten engaged. I smiled through the screen, proud moved. She asked if I ever thought about reaching out again. "Not really," I said, "but sometimes when the wind hits just right, I think I hear my father's voice. Not yelling, just repeating the lie he built his life on: I gave you everything. And I always whisper back the truth. You tried to take everything, but I kept what mattered, myself. And that is everything." On what would have been my father's 70th birthday, I stood by a canal and dropped a stone into the water. No ritual, no speech, just acknowledgement of what was, of what will never be. Some people earn graves, some earn distance. He earned silence. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I never needed to, because the story didn't end with his destruction. It didn't end with courtroom victories or ruined reputations. It ended with me alone, but whole, creating a life not built on healing what he broke, but on building what he never could. A life that wasn't reactive. A life that was mine. No longer a daughter bound by obligation. No longer an apology wrapped in excellence. no longer afraid. My name is Camille Browning, not legacy, not investment, not property, just me, free, and finally untouchable.